Tomás Q. Morín is the author of Patient Zero in a Larger Country. He translated Pablo Neruda's The Heights of Macchu Picchu and co-edited Coming Close, 40 essays on Philip Levine. He's at work on a memoir about fathers, and he teaches at Drew University and in the low-res MFA program of Vermont College of Fine Arts. Please welcome Tomás Morín.
Testing, everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good evening. How are y'all doing? Good. So first off, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you Malvern for hosting. This is the reschedule of, we were supposed to have this event an earlier time and no one could do it, and I'm glad that we're finally here even though we're down one.
There's something about this that is just...
There is.
You know,
Yeah. So originally I was going to read just poetry, and as was mentioned in the bio, I'm not just at work on a memoir, I have a memoir out on submission, and I'm hoping it'll get picked up soon, but I've read at Malvern quite a number of times, and I've never read from the memoir in public before. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to stick a toe into that water, see how cold or hot it is, tonight would be the night. And at first I was going to print out copies, then I thought, what if I chicken out? And then I don't read from it, and then I've wasted paper. So so after I read a poem from the book, I'm gonna, if you'll forgive me, read from my phone from the memoir, and then I'll close with another poem. So the title of this poem is Saudades, and saudades is a Portuguese word. It means, I first found the word, I was looking at one of those lists that it was like 20 most untranslatable words. And saudades was on there, and I plugged the word into one of those websites where you can hear a native speaker pronounce it. And I must have hit play on that website like 40 times. And I was really trying to break down the two syllables of the word. So there came a point where all I heard was sal and then dodges. And then I started thinking of pigs running away from people. And then the next thing I knew, I had this poem brewing. Saudades. When that word, one part swine, one part evasion, first wobbled into my life, I was eating pastrami and hiding in my office from students. And I know Andrade was in the air, as was the samba, and how it's almost impossible to translate either one. Nor should you, unless you've been a disciple of the rough grief that lovingly wraps you in its wings, which is warmer than one would expect. So much so that it's easy to forget for a moment something trivial like pigs aren't supposed to fly. Or that if you say saudades with enough pain and heart, the pigs of your past will come trotting out of the dark, doing their little sideways dance around you, shaking their hips to the drum in your chest, until you forget what a frown is, or why we need them. And oh, they will remind you how delicious Carnival is, and how glorious it is to make the past present, and how easily one can sleep dressed in feathers. I can't remember how old I was the first time I saw my father cook. 4, 5 maybe? He was in the front seat of the car, and I was supposed to have my eyes closed in the back. I'd never seen him do this at home, though I'd wanted to every time I wandered into the kitchen and was quickly shuffled out. I was impressed the first time I watched him cooking. Who knew a spoon and a bit of cotton was all anyone needed to make some magic happen? He once took a bottle cap and stuck a match on the side of it like a handle. In no time flat, he cooked up a bit of heroin in his tiny pot. If there had been a dark version of the Boy Scouts, one focused on hustling and crime, my father would have earned all of the badges, and the founder and president, had his handsome face on all the posters and brochures. He could cook faster than it probably takes most people to shampoo. In grade school, when someone bragged about their father, I'd wanted to say, "Oh yeah? Well, my dad can shoot heroin faster than yours." Or even better, the one that could have won any father bragging contest. "My dad can shoot more heroin than yours and not die." Once the heroin was cooked and the cotton had done its work, there was nothing left but to draw it up. He held the needle to the light and flicked it with his hard fingers. The liquid inside was the color of that last pool of iced tea in the bottom of the pitcher at home, before I tipped it and gulped. My father has the body of an ox. How else could someone shoot heroin for 21 years and survive? His body was his blessing and our curse. It kept him alive long enough to kick after he was released from the penitentiary, but it never let him truly hit rock bottom on the outside. Before he could finally kick, doctors discovered his gallbladder was shot. For so many years late in his life, the pain of his withdrawals was his gallbladder screaming for someone to free it from the prison of his body. For some reason, he never cared for hiding his track marks. Some folks shoot in their legs and all kinds of odd places, some even between their toes. No, his favorite spot was the classic one, just below the biceps. The same cephalic vein doctors use when they draw blood. He stuck that vein so much over the years, it came to look like a marble was hidden under his skin. It was black, hard, and anyone who saw it knew what it meant. To this day, I tell nurses to draw from my left arm, because the vein is less pronounced there. If I don't, and they use the right, and by the time I get home, the spot they used has risen and rounded off, not unlike the first time I took a pencil and tapped its yellow body with my fingernail before shoving it under the skin of my little arm. The knowledge that I was a grown-up filled my chest that night. I wasn't a little boy anymore who couldn't be left alone at home. I was a man who owned his body, who could make it bleed when he wanted to. So what, I thought, if I hadn't made my own fire in the back seat? The fire would come in time. Filled with pride, I tapped my mother on the shoulder and showed her the little man I now was. They called my father Indio. Well, his friends called him Chief, even the ones that spoke Spanish. Indio was mostly for strangers or business. One summer I saw a man call him Chief, and then his mouth twisted into a slice of watermelon. In first grade, I thought I cracked the mystery of where Indio came from. On the cover of my Big Chief writing tablet, there was my father's dark skin, the furrowed brow. There was even the mix of pride and hurt in his eyes, forever mixed on something just over my shoulder. Though my father's face on everyone's tablets made me flush and beam, I tried to keep it to myself. It wasn't safe to talk about my father at school because people might ask questions. Even when a bully was in my face or I wanted to impress a little girl, I shut my mouth. If I didn't, the next thing I knew, my classmate with the prettiest pigtails would be at her kitchen table practicing her letters. Maybe that tricky K. Then her father walks in to grab a beer. On his way to the couch, to finish watching Hill Street Blues, he looks over her shoulder at the row of letters, tilted like wooden crosses in a cemetery, and says, "That's good, mija." She smiles and points to the face on the cover of her tablet and tells him a story about the little boy in her class. Her father laughs and his face wrinkles into a worn baseball glove. "Which little boy?" "Tomás." "Tomás who? What's his last name, mija?" Her tiny shoulders rise to her ears. "Babe, what's the last name of the boy named Tomás in Mija's class?" Her mother, reading in the next room, calls out, "Morín, his name is Morín." "Is his father Joe Morín?" "Yeah, I think so." "Mija, I don't want you talking to this boy. His father does bad things." "What kinds of bad things?" "You're too little to know. He's like the bad man on Daddy's TV show. Promise me you won't talk to him anymore, okay? Just be friends with other little boys." "Okay, Daddy." And so it would end. Another little girl whose hand I wouldn't get to hold crossed off my list. I knew the things my father did were bad. Being trained to watch for the evil police had taught me that. What I couldn't decide was whether my father just did bad things or whether he was a bad person. Not knowing made me afraid. If he was a bad person, would people think I was bad too when they found out he was my father? It was years before I found out the real story behind my father's nickname. When he was born, his family lived in Wyoming. They had migrated, as so many other families did, in search of work. The day his mother gave birth to him, his father showed up to the hospital to ask one question. When he found the nurse, he asked, "Is it a boy or a girl?" The story goes he got his answer and, without seeing his wife or child, left to smoke cigars and drink with his friends. When he came back the next day, he asked to see his baby. When he saw how dark his son was, he joked, "No, you don't. You're trying to slip me an indio. I know what you're up to." The running joke at the time among the migrant workers in Wyoming was that hospitals were trying to find homes for orphaned Native American infants by passing them off as Mexican American babies. Even though the joke was racist and made no logical sense, the hospital hallway filled with laughter and no one cared. When he looked at his son, he decided to keep the nickname because my father did look a little like an indio to him. When I was growing up, you could probably go in many neighborhoods where people were up to no good in the coastal Bend area and mention El Indio. And if someone didn't know him, they knew someone who did. I'm not saying my father was famous. He wasn't. Rather, he cast his net far and wide when it came to his hunt for drugs. The more people that would sell to him, the less likely he would find himself in an emergency desperate for a fix. In a situation like that, he could easily buy from a stranger who was an undercover cop. As far as nicknames go, Indio and Chief are pretty good. What guy wouldn't want to be called Chief? In Mathis, many people had nicknames. The one catch was you couldn't pick your own. If you tried, you'd be ignored and get called by whatever nickname your body suggested. Or worse, some interesting lie about you that was making the rounds. One guy everyone called Tick. He was short, overweight, and had the kind of plump, happy face you get after gorging on the neighbor's dog. Another guy was nicknamed Rana because he had a voice so raspy, it reminded you of a frog croaking. Had Tom Waits been from Mathis, Rana would have had competition for his name. A group of people could also be given a nickname. Someone walking down the road one day looked in a yard where kids were crawling in a tree like monkeys. That was all it took for those brothers and sisters to be called Los Changos. A pair of brothers from another family were Los Calcetines after someone saw them playing outside as children with nothing on their feet but long socks. The nickname didn't always end with the person it was given to. When a man named La Víbora had children, it seemed like the most natural thing to call all of them snakes too. In conversation, that family was then known as Las Víboras. If you'd been nicknamed La Paca because your long torso with no curves reminded people of a rectangular hay bale, and when you had children who inherited the shape of your body, of course everyone was going to call your kids Las Paquitas. Physical disabilities were not out of bounds. If I had had a bum leg I dragged behind me, I might have been nicknamed Escoba because of the sweeping motion I made. A boy who was born mute was called Mudo. A man who was my father's age was El Columpio, after his legs that had been twisted by polio made him swing his arms and legs when he walked. While calling someone a swing sounds cruel, he smiled when I saw someone yell, "Columpio!" And why wouldn't he smile when having a nickname meant you belonged? Besides, who wouldn't want people to say your name and think of kids laughing as they swung from the earth to the sky like pendulums of joy? That felt okay.
Really good.
So, does anyone know what the Voyager spacecraft is and what was sent into space aboard it? The Golden Record. It's a collection of greetings in dozens of languages, songs, images, and also instructions. So that way, when aliens find it one day, they'll know how to play a record and know all about us. So this poem is called Gold Record. Dark was the night the Voyager slipped into space, carrying the music of one whale greeting another, as well as the thud of the stubborn heart and 3, maybe 4 people laughing, the sum of whose voices isn't that much different from the few seconds of herded sheep, at least my poor, imperfect ear, that still has trouble distinguishing a caterwaul from a stabbing victim. Two sounds are wise Sagan did not include on his gilded handshake to the stars, which is regrettable, because what better way to capture our tempers and apathy than record some pitiful soul, hand at his punctured side, trying to groan louder than the TVs the neighborhood keeps turning up, because they think he's a pair of cats fucking under the luminous stars, the very stars the Voyager will photograph on the sly, until it stumbles upon a ship, piloted by a race of beings so starved for connection, they cancel their plans for the evening and sit on shag rugs, their favorite souvenir from the 70s, and cue our golden record on the turntable they inherited from their in-laws, never expected to use for anything other than drinks and magazines to entertain the occasional visitor, much less to hear Blind Willie Johnson, that priest of the night Sagan placed alongside Stravinsky and company, because in the 3 minutes and 21 seconds Johnson sang for Columbia in 1927, he moaned to the heavens about homelessness or immortality or some other mumbo-jumbo any race smart enough to escape gravity and cross the peacock black of galaxies would never believe, because they would know the blues are always about love gone cold, and its light, the clammy light we might spend years saying we can't live without, and then do. I'll close with one more. So for anyone who might happen to be a fan of the old championship wrestling, there's a joke in here for you. Nature Boy. If I had enough cages to keep all the birds I've collected over the years, now I'd have to open a shop, because there's only so much room in a 2-bedroom walk-up for 48 birds, not to mention the dancing bears and the frogs, or the different varieties of fish, the one species of flea. I almost forgot the proud dogs and the lone mule, the profane one who entered my life to curse its scribes and Pharisees. Maybe he let the mouse I found forever dying at the end of a poem ride on his back like a whiskered Christ. And if not, maybe my Yeti could do it when he's not downtown working security at the store, or teaching the parrots how to say brotherhood in grunt, and how to comb out the tangles and mud from his hair, whose sweat reminds me of that bearded collector of beasts with the ark, who would have no doubt understood how I feel, that prophet of change under whose spell I want to confess that I'm a Christian of the Old Testament, that my grandfather hung all his goats upside down, their throats over a bucket, and slapped their chest like that other nature boy who strutted around the ring like a peacock with his feathered hair that stayed immaculate, even on the nights he lost to our hero, Wahoo McDaniel, who never played the heel. He who hailed from the lost tribes of Oklahoma, who made us want to be chiefs so much we wore pigeon feathers and circled each other inside a green square of water hose until someone finally rang the bell that was never there, and we sprang toward each other like animals in love or at war. Thank you.